Okay, this is going to be part 6 of how the brain works, how your brain works. And we're going to talk especially about this book here. It's called 1,000 Brains by Jeff Hawkins. Just came out like this past month. This guy, Jeff Hawkins, is a computer scientist and neuroscientist. He's the guy who invented the Palm Pilot, and he's a millionaire several times over from his success with that company, which is great. Kind of reminds me like Ben Franklin. Made a lot of money when he was young, and then he can pursue what he really loves to do. He loves being a neuroscientist. His book is called The 1,000 Brain Theory, and it's really sort of a paradigm shift in thinking about neuroanatomy. It's called 1,000 Brains because he's really talking about the Neocortex, cortical columns. These are the cortical columns of Mountcastle. Vernon Mountcastle was a neuroscientist who had noticed that the cortical columns, which means the gray matter ribbon around the surface of the brain, cortex means bark, like the bark of a tree, which is on the outer surface of the brain. So I'm going to put the book down. He said, gee, these cortical columns look about the same everywhere. The occipital cortex and the visual cortex, parietal lobe, frontal lobe, temporal lobe. He said, what makes these cortical columns unique in terms of their function is what they're connected to. And at the same time, Jeff Hawkins had read an article by Vernon Mountcastle in the 1980s where Mountcastle had suggested, gee, given the fact that cortical columns look about the same almost everywhere in the brain, if somebody could figure out how one of them works, you could maybe figure out how the entire brain works. And Jeff Hawkins, his goal is to truly understand how the brain works with the hope that that will enable him subsequently to make the best form of artificial intelligence to be able to function like the brain. And according to Jeff Hawkins, he thinks that most other types of artificial intelligence are overrated. He says they have no true intelligence. They can't think. They might recognize a picture of a cat, but they don't really know what a cat is, for example. They might be able to be programmed to do one thing, like play chess or play the game Go, but they don't really understand anything else about the world, nor are they able to learn. They just have a fixed program that they run on, rather than a human is always learning new things. And one of the things I thought was interesting, to remind me, there's a guy by the name of Gary Lynch, PhD at University of California, Irvine. It's a really famous place for doing neuroscience. By the way, what neuroscience center has the most obese students? Hippocampus. That's just a joke. Okay. Anyways, Gary Lynch, UC Irvine, had said he thought that the human neocortex evolved from the rodent olfactory cortex because it's harder to precisely localize a smell. When you're looking at something, you're looking right at it, and you can make a pretty precise map of that. Whereas odors and smells, it's hard to precisely track them, and it led to more of a random association cortex, and he felt that had more flexibility to be expanded into our modern thinking neocortex of humans. He has a whole interesting story about how a big meteorite landed on Earth, and then the dinosaurs went extinct, and the rodents then subsequently evolved into becoming the monkeys, and the monkeys came down out of the trees, and that's us today, supposedly. All right, Jeff Hawkins noted that on his research and what he studied elsewhere, that the individual cortical columns have grid and place cells. It was previously thought that grid and place cells and head orientation cells, as we spoke about in the previous lecture, was primarily something related to the hippocampus for navigation. But now what Jeff Hawkins is saying, no. Each individual cortical column has grid and place cells, and each column makes a reference frame about whatever it's interested in. So I can have a reference frame of this pointer, I can have a reference frame of this book, I know it weighs about 1 pound, I know I can hold it this way, I can open it up this way, I know what to expect in the front and the back. And what he's saying is, just like one navigates the world, walking down a path in a forest, walking down a street in a town, one navigates handling an object or anything you interact with in the world. And you have to know what it is, you have to know where it is relative to your body, and then you form all kinds of concepts about it. Well, a book is something for reading, okay? A pointer is something for pointing, and you can make it longer, you can make it shorter. And he basically says, he calls these reference frames, that we make a reference frame of everything we learn in the world so that we can manipulate it, interact with it, understand it. And this idea of a reference form for an object kind of reminded me of, Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, and Plato's idea of the perfect forms. This is the form of a chair. This is the form of a dry erase board. And also, Jeff Hawkins talks about how he says when we think about our reference model of an object. and we have a picture in our mind. And that reminded me of Aristotle. Aristotle had said, when we think in pictures. And you know, too, you get an idea, you get a feeling, and then you try to articulate it. Anyways, what is the big goal of Jeff Hawkins' work? It is to be able to make intelligent artificial intelligence. And I think the book's very good, by the way. I enjoyed reading it. He writes very clear. It's pretty simple. I blew through it really fast because it's really like 3 books in one. I was just curious about how the brain works. Then he starts going into all this artificial intelligence design in a computer, which I don't particularly care about that too much, but and some other stuff. But the part on the brain I thought was pretty good. I thought it was pretty clear, and I think he might be right. I can't say he's right on everything, but he's obviously a very smart guy. It's a very interesting book. So that's it for part 6, Thousand Brain Theory of Jeff Hawkins.